They told me it was just for a week. A little rest, Mom. Just until the paperwork clears. I'm 83, not embalmed. I still make my own quince marmalade and polish my silver samovar every Sunday. Yet that morning, my son Derek held my elbow like I was made of spun glass and steered me through the sliding doors of Rosehaven Care as if he'd already buried me. The real shock didn't hit until I heard him at the reception desk say, in a voice he thought I couldn't hear, "Yes, the listing goes live today. She won't be a problem." That was the moment I understood. They hadn't brought me here to recover. They'd put me here to sell my house. Hi, my dears. Grace here. When I first heard Margot's story, I couldn't believe it. 83 years old and treated like an obstacle. Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt someone making decisions about your life without you? They took my phone for safekeeping before I'd even sat down. A nurse with a name badge that read, Talia, smiled too wide and dropped it into a drawer beneath the desk. Facility policy, she chirped. Derek avoided my eyes. Sloane, my daughter-in-law, adjusted her silk scarf like we were checking into a spa instead of surrendering my independence. I noticed everything. The faint smell of disinfectant mixed with overcooked cabbage, the ticking wall clock shaped like a sunflower, the stack of glossy brochures featuring gray-haired couples laughing over something no one here was laughing about. My house needs a little updating anyway, Derek added casually, tapping his phone. This is for the best. For the best. I built that house with Harold when interest rates were savage and money was thinner than phyllo dough. I planted the magnolia in the front yard the year Derek started school. I knew every crack in the driveway, every creak in the stairs, and now my own son was speaking about it in past tense. They led me down a corridor lined with framed watercolor paintings of sailboats. Room 214. My suitcase landed on the vinyl floor with a soft thud. The bedspread was the color of diluted mustard. A roommate, Mrs. Chen, watched me from her recliner with sharp, appraising eyes. "First week?" she asked. "Apparently," I replied. Lunch was announced over an intercom that crackled like it resented being alive. In the dining hall, they served something they called cassoulet. I've made cassoulet. This wasn't it. I forced down 3 bites while listening. Always listen. 2 aides whispered about closing documents. A man at the next table muttered that his daughter promised to renovate and flip. Renovate and flip what? Parents? Back in the lobby, I slowed my steps near reception. The same drawer that held my phone was slightly ajar. I could see the corner of my floral case peeking out like a trapped bird. Derek leaned over the counter, voice low. The realtor said she already signed last month. Signed what? I hadn't signed anything except a birthday card for my neighbor and a check for the electric bill. I stepped closer. Derek, I said clearly, what exactly did I sign? He startled, then recovered with that patronizing smile he uses when he thinks I'm confused. Just routine authorization, Mom. You don't need to worry about the details. I have survived childbirth without anesthesia, a recession, and Harold's heart attack. I do not worry about details. I nodded slowly instead, pretending to accept his explanation. Sometimes the best way to catch a fox is to let him think the henhouse door is open. That evening, Talia returned with a clipboard. We just need your signature here and here, Mrs. Ellis. I adjusted my glasses deliberately. The pages were thick with legal language, transfer of responsibility, asset management, power of attorney acknowledgement. My name printed neatly at the bottom, but the signature space was blank. Blank for now. I'll read it in the morning, I said. Her smile thinned. It's standard. So am I replied. Standard enough to read before I sign. When she left, I heard her whisper to someone in the hallway. She's sharper than he said. Sharper than he said. The words settled into me like a coal beginning to glow. Derek had underestimated me. That would be his first mistake. Mrs. Chen leaned toward me once the lights dimmed. They tried with me, too, she murmured. My nephew. Watch the paperwork. I lay back on the stiff pillow and stared at the ceiling tiles. Through the thin wall, I could hear the receptionist's phone ring, then a man's voice. Cheerful, professional. Caldwell Realty. Caldwell. I repeated the name silently until it felt carved into bone. Somewhere out there, strangers were probably scheduling viewings of my living room, discussing square footage and curb appeal while my teacups still sat drying on the rack. They thought they had time. They thought I was contained. They thought 83 meant finished. They were wrong. Morning in Rosehaven begins with the metallic rattle of carts and the smell of oatmeal cooked into submission. I woke before the aides, before the hallway lights flickered fully awake. At 83, sleep comes in careful portions, like rationed sugar. I dressed slowly, chose my navy cardigan, the one with the mother-of-pearl buttons Harold brought me from Marseille decades ago, and sat by the window as if I had nowhere urgent to be. Let them think I was settling in. At breakfast, they handed me a plastic tray. Oatmeal, a bruised banana, weak tea. I carried it myself. A small rebellion, but deliberate. Across from me sat a man named Arthur, who introduced himself 3 times in 5 minutes. On my left, Mrs. Chen watched everything the way a hawk studies a field. They tell you how long you're staying? She asked quietly. A week, I said. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. That's what they told me in January. It was September. I kept my face neutral, but inside something sharpened. A week could stretch like taffy if no one pulled it back. After breakfast, I made my first official request. I approached the reception desk, where a young woman with coral lipstick tapped at her keyboard. Her name tag read, Brianna. I'd like copies of my admission paperwork for my personal records, I said pleasantly. She blinked. We usually provide those through family representatives. I am my own representative, I replied. Last I checked. Her fingers paused midair. I'll need to ask Ms. Ketter. There it was, the administrator, the gatekeeper, Ms. Ketter appeared 15 minutes later, sharp suit, sharp bob, sharp smile. She carried a tablet instead of paper, as if ink itself were outdated. Mrs. Ellis, I hear you have questions. I always do, I said. It keeps the mind limber. She explained policies in a tone designed for toddlers and shareholders. Temporary stay, supportive environment, asset coordination assistance. That phrase caught my attention. Asset coordination? I asked lightly. Just ensuring continuity of care, she said, eyes cool. Many families choose to streamline financial responsibilities while their loved ones recover. Streamline. Such a tidy word for stripping someone's life down to paperwork. I won't be streamlining anything without review, I said. Please print my documents. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. There may be a small administrative delay. Of course, I said. I'll wait. And I did. I sat in one of the lobby chairs beneath the sunflower clock and waited long enough to make it inconvenient. Staff passed me. Residents shuffled by. I smiled at each one. An old woman waiting patiently is invisible until she isn't. Eventually, Brianna handed me a thin stack of papers. Not all of them, I was sure, but enough. Back in my room, I read every line. Temporary guardianship authorization, financial oversight clause, a paragraph referencing property disposition in the best interest of care funding. My name typed neatly. No signature yet. But attached behind it was a photocopy of a separate page. A signature, supposedly mine, dated 3 weeks earlier. The ink looked too dark, too fresh. And the signature itself, it was close. Close enough for someone who had seen it often. But they'd forgotten something small. I stopped looping the G in Margot after my arthritis worsened. The flourish was wrong. My hands didn't shake. They steadied. There was a knock. Derek. He stepped inside with the air of someone visiting a hotel guest. "How are you settling in?" "I've had worse vacations," I said. He ignored that. "The realtor says there's strong interest. We might close quickly. It's better this way, Mom. The stairs alone." "I climbed those stairs yesterday," I cut in. "Without oxygen." He exhaled sharply. "Why are you making this difficult?" "Because you are trying to erase me," I thought. "Because you believe age equals consent. Because somewhere along the line you decided I was an obstacle instead of a mother." Aloud I said, "I haven't agreed to sell my house." He smiled again, thinner this time. "We discussed it." "No," I said. "You discussed it." Silence stretched between us. I watched him calculate. "Push harder or retreat?" "Just sign the forms," he said finally, lowering his voice. "It simplifies everything." "For whom?" "I'll review them with an attorney," I said. His expression flickered, just for a second. There it was. Fear. "You don't need a lawyer," he snapped too quickly. "That's interesting," I replied softly, "because that's exactly when I do." After he left, I folded the copied signature page and slipped it inside my cardigan pocket. Evidence. A seed. Later that afternoon, I wandered the hallway, mapping the building in my mind. Fire exits. Staff-only doors. The location of the receptionist's desk phone. I noted the camera angles, the rhythm of shift changes, the moments when the lobby thinned to almost nothing. Near the maintenance closet, I met a man tightening a loose handrail. His name tag read, Luis. "Slippery step," he muttered. "Liability," I answered. He glanced at me, surprised. "I used to manage Harold's hardware accounts," I added casually. "I understand risk." He chuckled. "Most folks here don't." "Most folks here aren't finished yet," I said. That evening, as I returned to my room, I passed the reception desk just as Brianna answered the phone. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell," she said brightly. "She's adjusting well. No complications." No complications. I kept walking, heart steady, mind racing. They were updating the realtor on my compliance, on my silence. I would not be silent. In my room, I sat at the small desk beneath the fluorescent light and began writing names on the back of a crossword puzzle page. Brianna, Ms. Ketter, Luis, Caldwell, dates, times, words overheard. If they wanted paperwork, I would give them paperwork, and I would not lose my house without a fight. The next morning, I asked for my medication list, not because I needed it. I take exactly 2 prescriptions and a calcium supplement shaped like a chalky lemon, but because paper creates trails, and trails lead somewhere. The nurse on duty, a tall man named Gregory with tired eyes, hesitated when I made the request. "Is something wrong with your dosage?" he asked. "I like to know what enters my body," I replied. At my age, surprises are rarely delightful. He printed the sheet. I thanked him warmly, folded it, and slipped it into the growing archive inside my cardigan drawer. Every document bore the facility's letterhead. Every page carried dates. Dates mattered. In the hallway, I noticed something new taped beside the elevator. Outgoing calls must be scheduled through approved contacts. Approved contacts. The phrase felt like a lock clicking into place. I approached reception again. Brianna's coral lipstick had shifted slightly off-center, as if she'd been chewing on a problem. "I'd like to make a call," I said. "To your son?" she asked automatically. "No," I replied. "To my insurance company." Her fingers froze over the keyboard. "We usually coordinate that through family." "Do you?" I tilted my head. "Because my policy is in my name. I pay the premiums, unless that's changed too." She swallowed. "I'll check." While she stepped away, I leaned slightly over the counter and glimpsed the screen. A tab was open, labeled Property Transfer, Ellis. My pulse didn't spike. It slowed. Anger, when refined, becomes clarity. "Ms." Ketter appeared again, efficient as ever. "Mrs. Ellis, we're concerned that too much stress could hinder your recovery." "Recovery from what?" I asked calmly. She didn't answer directly. "Your son indicated you've had some confusion recently." Confusion. There it was. The word they use when an elderly woman disagrees. "My confusion is limited," I said evenly, "to why my property is being discussed without my consent." Her smile thinned. "All decisions are made in your best interest." "My best interest," I repeated softly, "has included paying my own taxes for 56 years. The lobby air shifted. A few residents watched openly now. I realized something important. Control depends on isolation. If I became visible, vocal, documented, it would complicate their narrative. That afternoon, Derek returned, less patient than before. "Why are you interrogating staff?" he demanded the moment we were alone. "I'm asking questions," I said. "There's a difference." "You're making it harder." "For whom?" "For everyone," he snapped. "The buyers are scheduled to view the house tomorrow." The buyers. So it was true. Viewings had begun. Strangers walking through my living room, evaluating my Persian rug, opening Harold's study drawers. "I have not signed anything," I said. "You did," he insisted. 3 weeks ago." I met his eyes steadily. "Show me." He hesitated. Then, from his leather folder, he pulled out a photocopy. The same signature page I'd seen attached to my paperwork. The same incorrect flourish. "That's not my signature," I said quietly. His jaw tightened. "It is." "No," I replied. "It's close." Silence pressed between us like a held breath. "You're not thinking clearly," he said finally, voice low. "This place will document that." There it was again. Documentation as a weapon. After he left, I sat very still. Fear tried to creep in, the kind that makes your hands cold and your throat tight. But fear is wasteful unless you convert it. I opened the drawer and examined the copied signature again. The ink density, the angle, the pressure marks inconsistent with my arthritis. They'd practiced, or someone had. That evening, during dinner, a rubbery chicken breast masquerading as coq au vin, I struck up a conversation with Gregory. "Tell me," I said lightly, "who notarizes documents here?" He blinked. "Notaries usually come from outside." "Do they log visits?" "Yes. Front desk." Of course they did. After dinner, I lingered near reception under the pretense of admiring the artificial ficus tree. When Brianna stepped away to retrieve a file, I leaned just enough to see the open ledger book on the counter. Visitors. Dates. A notary listed 2 weeks ago. The same week as the alleged signature. I memorized the name. If a notary had witnessed my signature, then either I had blacked out completely, or someone had arranged something far more deliberate. Back in my room, Mrs. Chen lowered her voice. They tried to get me declared unfit, she whispered. Said I was paranoid. Are you? I asked gently. She smiled faintly. Not about this. Neither was I. I lay in bed listening to the distant hum of the building. Somewhere in the lobby, the phone rang again. Caldwell Realty, perhaps. Buyers discussing paint colors. They believed I was contained within these walls. They believed time was on their side. But I had something they underestimated: memory, patience, and an understanding of how systems work. I didn't need to shout. I needed leverage. And leverage begins with proof. The next morning I woke with a clarity that felt almost medicinal. Fear had burned off, leaving only focus. If they wanted this done quickly, it meant something was already in motion. Closings are not spontaneous events. They are orchestrated. Papers move. Money waits. Deadlines loom, and deadlines can be interrupted. I dressed carefully. Gray slacks, pressed blouse, the pearl earrings Harold gave me on our 40th anniversary. Armor doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it gleams softly. At 10:30, Derek arrived again. No smile this time. He carried the leather folder like a shield. We need to finalize this, he said without greeting. The buyers are serious. I'm delighted for them, I replied. Perhaps they should purchase their own mother's house. His jaw flexed. Why are you being like this? Like what? Suspicious. Hostile. I am being attentive, I said. There's a difference. He pulled out the signature page again and placed it on the small desk in my room. You signed this. I didn't touch it. When? You don't remember? No, I said evenly. Because I didn't. He leaned closer. You've been forgetful lately, misplacing things, repeating stories. I repeat stories when people don't listen the first time, I answered. Silence again. He was trying to bait me into agitation. If I raised my voice, if I appeared erratic, it would validate whatever narrative he was feeding the staff. I want the original, I said calmly, not a copy. There is no difference, he snapped. There is, I replied. Ink tells stories, pressure marks, indentations. His eyes flickered. There it was again, that tiny fracture in confidence. You're exhausting, he muttered. Fraud usually is, I said softly. He stood abruptly. You're not well enough to manage this on your own. Then perhaps you should have waited until I was, I answered. When he left, he didn't slam the door. He closed it quietly. That worried me more. An hour later, Ms. Ketter appeared with Gregory. 2 witnesses. Interesting. Mrs. Ellis, she began, we've received feedback that you're exhibiting heightened anxiety regarding your property. I'm exhibiting interest, I corrected. Gregory avoided my eyes. We want to ensure you're safe, she continued. If necessary, we can arrange a cognitive evaluation. There it was, the escalation. A cognitive evaluation requires consent, I said, and a neutral physician. She smiled. We have in-house resources. I'm certain you do, I replied, but I prefer outside ones. Her tone cooled. Your son holds temporary decision-making authority. Based on what document? I asked. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she produced a form. If you sign this acknowledgement, it will streamline communication. I read it carefully. It was cleverly worded. Confirmation of supportive oversight. No explicit surrender of rights, yet enough ambiguity to open doors. "I'll decline," I said. Her patience thinned. "Refusal may complicate your discharge timeline." There it was, a subtle threat. I leaned back in the chair and looked at her steadily. "Are you suggesting I'm not free to leave?" Gregory shifted uncomfortably. "We're suggesting you complete your recovery period," she replied. "Recovery from what?" I asked again. No answer. After they left, I felt the first real wave of anger crest. Not hot and wild, but cold and precise. They were building a case around me. Notes and charts, behavioral observations, language that could be twisted. If they labeled me incompetent, the sale would proceed without obstacle. I needed outside contact. That afternoon, I wandered near the maintenance closet again. Luis was replacing a flickering fluorescent tube. "Bad ballast," he muttered. "Everything flickers before it fails," I said. He glanced at me. "You're not like most residents." "I'm not most residents." He lowered his voice. "Your son's been asking about camera footage." "Of what?" I asked. "Lobby, desk, calls." Of course he had. "Luis," I said carefully, "is there a public phone in this building?" He hesitated. "I am not asking you to break rules," I added, "only to confirm whether one exists." He looked down the hallway, then back at me. "Old landline, staff lounge, mostly unused." "Does it dial out?" He gave the smallest nod. That was enough. That evening, as dinner trays clattered and attention shifted toward a televised game show, I watched the rhythm of the floor. Nurses busy. Reception distracted. Derek absent. In my room, I opened my purse. They had removed my phone, but they hadn't emptied everything. Tucked behind a folded recipe card for babka was a small, worn index card. A number written years ago in Harold's careful handwriting, our old attorney's office. The firm had likely changed. Partners retire. Numbers update. But offices leave trails. I traced the ink with my thumb. If I could reach that phone, even once, I could start something they couldn't easily stop. Outside, the hallway lights dimmed to evening mode. Soft, complacent. They thought paperwork and proximity were enough to contain me. They were about to learn that I still knew how to pick the right moment. I waited until the building exhaled. There's a moment in places like Rosehaven when the energy dips. After dinner, before night medications, when staff are counting blister packs and residents are half asleep in front of muted televisions. The corridor lights dimmed just enough to feel forgiving. That was my moment. I stepped out of my room with a cardigan draped over my arm, as if I were simply restless. At 83, restlessness is considered harmless. No one questions it. Near the nurse's station, Gregory was flipping through charts. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much excitement," I said lightly. "I've always preferred late evenings. Harold used to say I did my sharpest thinking after sunset." He gave a distracted smile and returned to his paperwork. Good. Distracted was useful. I continued down the hallway, past the faded watercolor sailboats, past the artificial ficus tree, until I reached the maintenance closet. The door was slightly ajar. Luis had left a rolling cart parked outside earlier. Now it was gone. But the staff lounge sat just beyond. The lounge door wasn't locked. Inside, fluorescent light hummed overhead. A coffee maker sputtered weakly beside a stack of mismatched mugs. On the far wall, mounted beneath a bulletin board cluttered with shift schedules and a flyer for a chili cook-off, hung a beige landline phone. Old, corded, perfect. I stepped inside and closed the door gently behind me. For a moment, I simply stood there, listening. Footsteps in the hallway. a cart rattling in the distance. No one immediately approaching. I lifted the receiver. There's a particular weight to older phones. Solid, dependable. I pressed 9. The line hummed. It dialed out. Good. I took the index card from my pocket and dialed the number Harold had written years ago. The line rang twice before a recorded message answered. You have reached the law offices of Whitaker and Dunn. This number has changed. Please visit our website for updated contact information. Of course it had changed. I closed my eyes briefly. Think, Margot. Law firms don't vanish, they evolve. The name Dunn struck something in my memory. A holiday card. A charity gala. I tried dialing the operator. 0 still worked, and asked for a listing for Whitaker and Dunn. New name is Dunn, Patel, and Greer, the operator replied after a moment. Would you like the number? Yes, I said steadily. I wrote it down on the back of the chili cook-off flyer with a pen I found beside the coffee machine. Then I dialed. The phone rang 4 times before a crisp female voice answered. Dunn, Patel, and Greer. My name is Margot Ellis, I said carefully. I believe your firm once represented my late husband, Harold Ellis. I need immediate legal advice regarding a property transfer I did not authorize. A pause. May I ask your age, Mrs. Ellis? The voice asked. 83, I replied. Another pause. Longer. And are you currently at home? No, I said. I am currently in a care facility where my son claims I signed documents I did not sign. My house is scheduled for sale. The silence on the other end sharpened. 1 moment, she said. The line clicked. Then another voice came on, calm, measured. This is Aisha Patel. Mrs. Ellis, can you confirm whether you're safe to speak? Yes, I said, but not for long. Do not sign anything, she said immediately. Request copies of every document and ask directly whether a notary was present at the alleged signing. They claim there was, I said. 2 weeks ago. Then we can verify the notary log and the commission number, she replied. Also, if you did not sign, that constitutes potential fraud. We can file an emergency injunction to halt the sale. The word injunction felt like oxygen. There is a closing pending, I said. Buyers have already viewed the property. Do you have access to the title company's name? Not yet. Then ask for it. Calmly. If anyone suggests you're confused or incapable, state clearly that you are contesting the sale and requesting outside counsel. I will need written authorization from you to represent you. I can provide that, I said. Good. I'll prepare preliminary paperwork. Can you call again tomorrow at this time? Yes, I said. Mrs. Ellis, she added gently, do not let them isolate you. Too late for that, I thought. But isolation is only effective if you surrender. I won't, I said. I hung up and stood there for a second, heart pounding, not with fear but with momentum. Something had shifted. I was no longer reacting, I was initiating. A sound outside the door made me freeze. Voices. Derek's voice. She's settling in, he was saying. No issues. My grip tightened on the receiver. I waited until his footsteps receded, then slipped the flyer with Aisha's number into my sleeve and returned the phone to its cradle. I adjusted my expression before stepping back into the hallway. At the nurse's station, Gregory looked up. Everything all right? Couldn't find chamomile tea, I said mildly. Settled for water. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and allowed myself one slow breath. They thought the only phone call that mattered was the one between them and the realtor. They were wrong. Tomorrow, I would ask about the notary, and I would watch who flinched. The next morning, I did not rush. Urgency makes people suspicious. Calm unnerves them. After breakfast, powdered eggs attempting to impersonate a frittata, I walked to reception with measured steps. Brianna was alone at the desk, her coral lipstick freshly applied, as if yesterday's smudge had been erased, along with inconvenient thoughts. "Good morning," I said warmly. "I have a small question regarding the notary who witnessed my signature 2 weeks ago." Her fingers stilled. "I'd like the full name and commission number," I continued pleasantly. "For my records." Her eyes flicked to the computer screen, then toward the hallway leading to Ms. Ketter's office. "Why do you need that?" "Because I did not sign anything," I replied. "And if a notary witnessed me signing, then either I was unconscious, impersonated, or misrepresented. All three are concerning." The color drained slightly from her face. "I'll have to check," she said. "Please do," I answered. "I'll wait." I sat again beneath the sunflower clock. Residents drifted past. A volunteer arranged magazines. The building hummed with routine, but beneath it, something tightened. 10 minutes later, Ms. Ketter emerged. "Mrs. Ellis," she said, voice controlled. "We've confirmed a licensed notary was present." "Wonderful," I said. "May I have the details?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Why is this suddenly urgent?" "It has always been urgent," I replied. "You're only noticing now." She crossed her arms lightly. "Your son provided documentation indicating you were fully aware of the transaction." "I'm sure he did." "You're creating unnecessary conflict," she said. "No," I corrected. "I'm creating accountability." The lobby had grown quieter. Even the television in the corner seemed less loud. "Mrs. Ellis," she said carefully, "if you're feeling confused, we can arrange an evaluation today." "There it is again," I murmured. "Confusion." I stood, not abruptly, but firmly. "I am contesting the sale of my home," I said clearly enough for Gregory at the nurse's station to hear. "I have contacted legal counsel. Any further attempt to process documents without my explicit review will be documented." A ripple moved through the room. At that moment, Derek walked in. "What's going on?" he demanded. "Your mother is escalating things unnecessarily," Ms. Ketter said smoothly. "I am clarifying things," I corrected. Derek's eyes flashed. "Mom, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said. "You're embarrassing yourself." He lowered his voice. "You don't even remember signing." "I remember every detail of the last 6 months," I said evenly, "including the fact that I have not signed away my house." His composure cracked for a split second, and that was when I noticed something else. The notary name on the printed sheet Ms. Ketter reluctantly handed me was faint, almost like it had been added later. The commission number smudged, sloppy. "I'll verify this independently," I said. Derek stepped closer, anger barely contained. "You're not leaving this facility until this is sorted." The words landed heavily. "Are you detaining me?" I asked quietly. Silence. I looked at my son, really looked at him. The boy I once bandaged after scraped knees now stood between me and my own front door. "I am leaving when I choose," I said calmly. "And before I do, I'll be speaking with my attorney again." The word attorney hit him like a dropped plate. "You called someone?" he snapped. "Yes," I said, "from your carefully supervised building." For the first time, uncertainty overtook anger in his face. Ms. Ketter cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should all take a step back." "No," I said softly. "I believe we're finally stepping forward." I folded the notary information and slipped it into my pocket beside Aisha's number. The next move would not happen in this lobby. It would happen on paper. And paper, when handled correctly, can stop a sale cold. That afternoon, I did exactly what they expected me not to do. I stayed quiet. No confrontations. No pointed questions. I ate my lunch, over-salted minestrone attempting to taste like Tuscany, and even complimented the kitchen staff. I allowed Derek's last threat to linger in the air without reacting. When people believe they've intimidated you, they relax. Relaxed people make mistakes. At precisely 7:15, when the evening shift rotated and the lobby thinned, I made my way toward the staff lounge again. My pulse was steady. This was no longer emotional. It was procedural. The landline greeted me with its low, dependable hum. I dialed Aisha Patel directly this time. "She's escalating," I said, without preamble. "They're suggesting cognitive evaluations and implying I can't leave." "Did anyone state you are legally detained?" Aisha asked. "My son implied it." "Good," she replied. "Good?" I echoed. "Yes, because implication without documentation works in our favor. Listen carefully. I'm filing an emergency motion to halt the property transfer. I also want you to request your full medical chart immediately. In writing. If they refuse, that becomes relevant." "I'll do it," I said. "And one more thing," she continued. "Ask for the name of the title company handling the sale. If we notify them of a dispute before closing, they're obligated to pause." I smiled slightly. Obligated is my favorite word. She gave a brief, approving exhale. "You're sharper than most of my clients half your age, Mrs. Ellis." "They underestimate 83, I said. When I returned to the lobby, Derek was already there, pacing. He turned sharply when he saw me. "Where were you?" he demanded. "Walking," I replied. "You can't just disappear." "I was gone 12 minutes, I said calmly. "If that qualifies as disappearance, you must find airports terrifying." His face flushed. "We need to settle this," he hissed. "The closing is in 3 days." 3 days. There it was. The clock. "Who is the title company?" I asked casually. His eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because if I am selling my home," I said evenly, "I'd like to know who is handling the funds." "You're not handling anything," he snapped. "So you won't tell me," I concluded. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Stop talking to lawyers. You're making this expensive." "For whom?" I asked again. "For all of us." There it was, the crack in his composure. "For all of us," I repeated softly. "Or for you?" He looked away first. Ms. Ketter approached, clearly alerted by the rising tension. "Is there a problem?" "Yes," I said, before Derek could answer. "I'd like the name of the title company managing the sale of my property." "That's a family matter," she replied smoothly. "No," I said. "It's a legal matter." The room felt smaller suddenly. Derek inhaled sharply. "Fine. Northbridge title." He said it like a challenge. "Thank you," I replied. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply turned and walked back toward my room, feeling his stare burn into my back. Northbridge title. 3 days. In my room, I wrote everything down. Time, date, his admission, the facility's responses, the mention of cognitive evaluation. Then I added something else. Witnesses. Mrs. Chen had overheard the lobby exchange. Gregory had been present earlier. Luis knew about the camera inquiries. Patterns were forming. Later that evening, a nurse delivered a new form for me to sign. this one authorizing temporary oversight pending clarity. I didn't raise my voice. I simply wrote across the signature line, refused pending legal review, and beneath it, I signed my name, properly, with the correct unlooped G. The nurse stared at the page. I'll have to report this. Please do, I said gently. Reports create records. When she left, I allowed myself a single, quiet realization. They had planned this as a swift transaction. Contain the elderly mother, finalize the sale, present it as inevitable. But now lawyers were involved. A title company had been named. Documentation was growing. And most importantly, I was no longer isolated in silence. 3 days until closing. 3 days was more than enough time to stop a machine, if you inserted the right wrench. The next morning, I didn't wait for them to corner me. I cornered the process. After breakfast, I approached the reception desk with a sheet of paper in my hand. Not trembling, not defensive, simply prepared. I'd like to submit a written request for my complete medical chart, I said clearly, including intake assessments, behavioral notes, and any cognitive observations. Brianna stared at the paper as though it might bite her. You can ask your son. I am asking you, I interrupted gently, as the patient. She took the paper, uncertain. And I would also like written confirmation, I added, of whether I am legally free to leave this facility today if I choose. Her eyes widened. Why would you? Because it's a yes or no question. Within minutes, Ms. Ketter appeared again. Her composure was still polished, but something beneath it had tightened. You're creating disruption, she said quietly. No, I replied. I'm requesting clarity. You agreed to a temporary stay. I agreed to rest, I corrected, not confinement. She studied me carefully now, not as a fragile elder, but as a complication. If you leave prematurely, she said, your son may withdraw financial support for your care. I do not require his financial support, I answered. I own my home. The reminder landed heavily between us. You may leave, she said finally. However, we cannot guarantee readmission. Noted, I replied. She wasn't used to that response. Back in my room, I began organizing everything I had gathered. Medication lists, visitor logs, copies of disputed documents, the notary's name and commission number, the title company Derek had reluctantly revealed. Northbridge Title. I dialed Aisha from the staff lounge again. I have the title company name, I said. Good, she replied immediately. We've filed the emergency injunction this morning. It should reach them before the close of business. But I need one more thing. Have you formally stated in writing that you dispute the sale? Not yet, I admitted. Then do it today. Address it to the facility administrator and your son. Keep it simple. You did not sign, you do not consent, and you are represented by counsel. I can do that, I said. And Mrs. Ellis? She added, voice lowering slightly. If they attempt to restrict your communication again, that strengthens our position. They already have, I said. A pause. Good, she repeated. When I returned to the lobby, Derek was waiting. He looked tired now, less confident. His phone buzzed repeatedly in his hand. What did you do? He demanded. I wrote a letter, I replied. You called someone again? Yes. His jaw clenched. The realtor says there's a hold request pending. I tilted my head slightly. Imagine that. You're blowing this up over nothing, he said. We were helping you. By forging my signature? I asked calmly. His silence answered. A few residents nearby pretended not to listen. They were listening. "You don't understand how complicated things are," he muttered. "No," I said softly. "You don't understand how simple they are." I handed Ms. Ketter a copy of my written dispute in front of him. "I do not consent to the sale of my property," I read aloud. "Any documents bearing my alleged signature are fraudulent. I am represented by legal counsel." The word fraudulent seemed to drain the air from the room. Derek's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, and for the first time, genuine panic flickered across his face. "Northbridge just called," he said quietly. "And?" I asked. "They said there's a legal hold." I didn't smile. But inside, something shifted. 3 days until closing had just become uncertain, and uncertainty is where leverage lives. That night, the staff treated me differently. Politer, more cautious. Gregory avoided prolonged eye contact. Brianna no longer chewed her lipstick. Even Ms. Ketter's voice softened around the edges. Because now there was a paper trail. And paper trails don't vanish easily. In my room, I folded my clothes carefully back into my suitcase. Not to flee, but to signal readiness. If they thought placing me here would make me small, they had miscalculated. They had confined my body, but they had awakened my resolve. And tomorrow, the title company would have to answer questions they hadn't anticipated. Questions backed by ink. The next morning, the building felt different. Whispers moved faster than wheelchairs. I knew before anyone told me that Northbridge Title had received Aisha's injunction. There's a particular stillness that follows interruption, the kind that spreads through systems when someone pulls an unexpected thread. Derek arrived before 10. He didn't sit this time. He stood in front of me in the lobby, hands clenched at his sides. "You've frozen the sale," he said. "I've paused it," I corrected. "The buyers are threatening to walk." "They're free to," I replied. "You have no idea what this does to us." To us. There it was again, the language of shared burden masking individual motive. "I have every idea what it does to me," I said calmly. "It keeps my house from being sold without my consent." His voice dropped lower. "You're going to ruin everything." "Everything?" I asked softly. "Or your plan?" Before he could answer, Ms. Ketter approached with unusual urgency. "Mrs. Ellis," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Northbridge Title has requested direct confirmation from you regarding the disputed authorization." "Excellent," I said. "They'd like to speak with you by phone. Now." I felt a small current of satisfaction. This was no longer happening behind closed doors. "I'll take the call here," I said, gesturing to the reception desk. Derek stiffened. "This is unnecessary." "No," I replied. "It's transparent." Brianna placed the call on speaker at my request. A man's voice filled the lobby. "Mrs. Ellis? This is Thomas Avery from Northbridge Title. We've received notice from legal counsel indicating you dispute the validity of your signature on transfer documents. Is that correct?" "It is," I said clearly. "I did not sign those documents." A pause. "Were you present before a notary 2 weeks ago?" he asked. "No," I said. "And I would like verification of the notary's commission and physical location at the time of the alleged signing." Another pause. Longer this time. "We are reviewing that," he replied carefully. Derek shifted beside me, jaw tight. "Mr. Avery," I continued, "I am 83, not incapacitated. Any claim otherwise is inaccurate. I do not consent to the sale of my property." There it was. On record. "I understand," he said. "We are placing an immediate hold pending investigation." Derek exhaled sharply, almost a hiss. And Mr. Avery, I added. If my signature has been falsified, I trust your company will cooperate fully with any inquiry. We will, he replied. The line disconnected. Silence filled the lobby like smoke. Grace again, saying fraud out loud in front of your own child, takes strength. Would you have had the courage to make it public? Tell me honestly, what would you do? Derek turned to me, his composure finally cracking. You didn't have to do that in front of everyone, he said through clenched teeth. Yes, I answered quietly. I did. You've turned this into a spectacle. No, I said. You did that when you forged my name. His face went pale. I didn't. Stop, I said, raising a hand, not dramatically, just firmly. You practiced my signature. You forgot I stopped looping the G. His silence confirmed everything. Ms. Ketter looked between us, recalculating. This is a family matter, she murmured. No, I said again. It stopped being that when documents were falsified. For the first time since I'd arrived at Rosehaven, I saw uncertainty ripple through both of them. They had expected resistance. They had not expected exposure. And exposure changes everything. I folded my hands neatly in my lap. This is far from over, Derek muttered. I know, I replied, but now it's on record. And once something is on record, it becomes very difficult to pretend it never happened. The fallout began faster than I expected. By noon, Rosehaven felt like a building under inspection. Staff walked more carefully. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. Even the air seemed thinner. Derek hadn't left. He stood near the windows in the lobby, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent. I caught fragments as I passed. Temporary hold. No, she's being influenced. Yes. Cognitive concerns. Cognitive concerns. He was still trying to build that angle. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I returned to my room and wrote a second letter, this one addressed directly to Northbridge Title and copied to Aisha. Clear, precise. No emotion. I, Margot Ellis, do not consent to the sale of my property located at any documents bearing my signature dated within the past 30 days are disputed. I request immediate preservation of all related records. Preservation. Another useful word. I handed the letter to Brianna with instructions to scan and email it to the address I provided. She hesitated only a second before complying. When Derek realized what I'd done, he followed me down the hallway. "You're making this worse," he said, voice strained. "For whom?" I asked again. "For me," he burst out. There it was. Not for us. For him. I stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "Did you need the money?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. "Were you in trouble?" I pressed. His jaw tightened. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." He looked away. Silence can be more revealing than confession. Later that afternoon, Ms. Ketter requested a brief meeting in her office. I agreed, but only with Gregory present as witness. Inside, she closed the door, but left it slightly ajar. Calculated. "We're concerned this legal escalation may create reputational issues for the facility," she said carefully. "I imagine fraud investigations do that," I replied. Her smile faltered. "We had no reason to believe the documentation was invalid," she continued. "Your son presented it." "And you accepted it without confirming I had independent representation," I said. She shifted in her chair. "That is common practice in family-supported transitions." I am not transitioning, I said evenly. I am being displaced. Gregory cleared his throat softly, but said nothing. Ms. Ketter leaned forward. If the sale collapses, your continued stay here may become financially complicated. There will be no continued stay, I replied. That caught her off guard. I will be discharged tomorrow, I added calmly, voluntarily. You may not have appropriate support at home. I have locks, I said, and a lawyer. The meeting ended quickly after that. In the hallway, Derek intercepted me again. You're leaving? He asked sharply. Yes. You can't just go back there like nothing happened. Watch me. His composure was fraying now. You don't know what you're doing, he said. I know exactly what I'm doing, I replied. I'm removing myself from your leverage. He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as an aging parent, but as an opponent. By evening, my discharge papers were being prepared with remarkable efficiency. Amazing how quickly bureaucracy moves when liability enters the room. Before bed, I received a call in the staff lounge. It was Aisha. Northbridge has flagged inconsistencies with the notary stamp, she said. The commission number belongs to someone whose license expired last year. I closed my eyes briefly. So it's worse than we thought, I said. Yes, she replied. If this proceeds to formal investigation, it could carry criminal implications. Criminal. The word settled heavily. Will they arrest him? I asked quietly. That depends on how far this went, she said. But the paper trail is strengthening in your favor. After I hung up, I stood alone in the dim lounge, listening to the faint hum of the vending machine. My son had not merely rushed a sale, he had risked committing a crime. When I returned to my room, my suitcase was fully packed. Tomorrow, I would walk out of Rosehaven on my own terms. And once I was home, this would no longer be about stopping a sale. It would be about consequences. Discharge day arrived without ceremony. No balloons, no apologies, just paperwork. I signed my release forms slowly, reading each line. Gregory stood nearby, unusually quiet. When he handed me the final document, his voice lowered. I hope everything works out for you, he said. It already has, I replied. Derek was waiting outside the administrative office, pacing again. He stopped when he saw my suitcase. You're serious, he said. I always am. You can't go back to that house alone. I won't be alone, he frowned. Who's helping you? My attorney, I answered calmly. His shoulders tensed. We walked through the lobby together, past the sunflower clock, past the artificial ficus, past the desk where my phone had once been locked away. Brianna avoided my eyes. Outside, the air felt different, crisp, real. Not filtered through disinfectant and control. Derek reached for my suitcase. I didn't let go. I'll drive you, he said. No, I replied. I've arranged transportation. Right on cue, a dark sedan pulled into the circular drive. Derek's expression shifted from frustration to alarm. Aisha Patel stepped out. She was younger than I'd imagined, mid-40s perhaps, but her posture carried the steadiness of someone accustomed to confrontation. She walked toward us with measured confidence. Mrs. Ellis, she said warmly. Ready? Very, I replied. Derek stiffened. You didn't need to bring a lawyer to pick you up. She insisted, Aisha said smoothly, given the circumstances. What circumstances? He demanded. The disputed documents, the questionable notary commission, the attempted transfer of property without confirmed capacity assessment. She replied evenly. Each phrase landed like a stone. "This is a misunderstanding," Derek said quickly. "Then you won't object to transparency," Aisha answered. He didn't respond. I placed my suitcase into the trunk myself. As we drove away, I didn't look back at Rosehaven. But I did look at my son in the rearview mirror. He stood frozen on the curb, suddenly uncertain in a way I had never seen before. In the car, I exhaled slowly. "Northbridge confirmed the hold is active," Aisha said. "They've also notified the realtor that the transaction is under investigation." "Caldwell?" I said. "Yes," she replied. He's suddenly much less confident. "Good." She glanced at me briefly. "When we arrive at your home, we need to check something immediately." "The locks," I said. "Yes." My stomach tightened slightly, not from fear, but anticipation. If Derek had gone this far, what else had he done? We turned onto my street 20 minutes later. The magnolia tree stood exactly where I had planted it decades ago, branches heavy and dignified. My curtains were still drawn, the porch light off. But as the car slowed, something caught my eye. The front door handle. It gleamed. New. I hadn't replaced that handle in 20 years. Aisha parked. I stepped out of the car slowly, feeling the gravel beneath my shoes. I reached into my purse and pulled out my key. For a moment, I simply held it in my palm. Then I walked to the door and slid the key into the lock. It didn't fit. Aisha's voice was calm beside me. "Mrs. Ellis, did you authorize a lock change?" "No," I said quietly. The key scraped uselessly against metal that no longer belonged to me. My house stood before me, unchanged, familiar. And yet, I was locked out. Not by strangers. By my own son. I lowered my hand slowly. This wasn't just about a forged signature anymore. This was possession. And possession can be challenged. I turned to Aisha. "What's the next step?" I asked. Her eyes hardened slightly. "We enter legally," she said. And for the first time since this began, I felt something close to certainty. They had tried to remove me quietly. Now it would be anything but quiet. The locksmith arrived within 20 minutes. Aisha had made the call while we stood on my porch, my useless key still cold in my hand. The man stepped out of his van carrying a compact case of tools and the quiet indifference of someone who solves other people's problems for a living. "Proof of ownership?" he asked. Aisha handed him a printed copy of my property deed. "In her name," she said calmly. "No transfer completed." He nodded once and knelt at my door. I stood straight, watching. Across the street, Mrs. Holloway's curtains shifted slightly. Word travels fast on a quiet block. The locksmith worked efficiently. Within minutes, the new cylinder clicked loose in his hand. "Recently installed," he muttered. "I can see that," I replied. He replaced the lock entirely, handing me 2 fresh keys. "You're secured again." Secured again. I stepped across my own threshold slowly. The air smelled faintly different, not foreign, but disturbed, like someone had moved through it with purpose. The living room looked intact. Persian rug, mahogany side table, the silver samovar still resting where I'd left it. But something was off. The framed photographs on the mantel had been shifted slightly. My late husband's picture angled differently. The mail stack was gone. "They've been here," I said quietly. Aisha walked through the house methodically, taking photos with her phone. "We document everything," she said. In the kitchen, cabinet doors stood a fraction of an inch ajar. My spice rack, carefully alphabetized, had been disturbed. The jar of smoked paprika was in the wrong place. Small things, but deliberate. Upstairs, I paused outside Harold's old study. The door was open. It had been closed when I left. Inside, the filing cabinet drawers were not locked. Papers shifted. A folder labeled Insurance. Property lay on the desk. They had searched, not cleaned. Searched. I walked to the filing cabinet and opened the bottom drawer. The envelope containing my original will was still there, untouched. So this had been about speed, not inheritance. Aisha joined me upstairs. "There's more," she said quietly. "What?" I asked. She handed me her phone. An email from Northbridge Title had just arrived. Upon further review, we have identified irregularities in the notarization process. The listed notary denies being present at the signing. The commission number appears altered. I inhaled slowly. Altered. That meant intent. Downstairs, the front door opened abruptly. Derek. He must have been watching from the end of the street. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Entering my home," I replied evenly. "You can't just break in." "I didn't," I said. "I replaced a lock that was installed without my authorization." His eyes darted to Aisha. "You're trespassing." "She is the legal owner," Aisha replied calmly. "You are not." His composure cracked again. "You don't understand," he said, voice shaking now, not with anger, but something else. "This was temporary. I was going to fix everything after closing." "Fix what?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. Then the truth slipped. "I needed the money." There it was. "For what?" I pressed. He looked at the floor. "Investment losses," he muttered. "Debt." "You forged my signature to cover your debt?" I asked. Silence. The house felt smaller suddenly. "This didn't have to become criminal," Aisha said evenly. "But altering a notary commission number escalates matters." Derek's head snapped up. "I didn't alter anything." "Then who did?" she asked. His silence deepened. I looked at him, truly looked at him, not as an opponent, but as the child I once carried. "You chose this," I said softly. "Not me." Outside, I heard a car door slam. Another vehicle had arrived. Aisha glanced toward the window. "That," she said quietly, "may be the beginning of consequences." And for the first time, I saw real fear in my son's eyes. Not fear of me, fear of what was coming next. The car that pulled up behind Aisha's sedan was not subtle. White, official, deliberate. Derek saw it before I did. His shoulders stiffened, and for a brief second, he looked like a boy again, caught, calculating excuses before words had even formed. Two uniformed officers stepped out. One of them approached the porch calmly. "We received a report regarding a potential fraud complaint tied to this address," he said. Aisha stepped forward smoothly. "That would be us. Mrs. Margot Ellis is the homeowner. There's an active dispute regarding forged property transfer documents." The officer nodded and turned to me. "Ma'am, are you stating you did not authorize the sale of your property?" "I did not," I said clearly. "And you did not sign the documents submitted to Northbridge Title?" "I did not." He made a note. Derek stepped in abruptly. "This is a misunderstanding, family dispute. It's being blown out of proportion." "Sir," the second officer said evenly, "did you submit documents bearing your mother's signature?" "Yes, but were you present when she signed them?" Derek hesitated. She signed weeks ago." In front of a licensed notary? The officer pressed. Silence. Aisha held up her phone. Northbridge has already identified irregularities with the notary commission number. The word irregularities seemed to land heavier than accusation. The officer looked at Derek again. Sir, we need a clear answer. Derek's breathing had changed. Faster. Shallower. I didn't think it would matter, he said finally. It was temporary. I just needed the equity released. So you signed for her? The officer asked. Derek said nothing. That was answer enough. The officer turned to me gently. Ma'am, would you like to press charges? The question hovered between us. Derek looked at me then, not defiant, not angry, afraid. I felt something twist inside me, not softness, but recognition. He had made a choice. Several, in fact. Deliberate ones. Yes, I said quietly. The word did not shake. The officers informed Derek he would need to come with them to provide a formal statement. They did not cuff him on the porch, but the implication was clear. As they guided him toward the patrol car, he turned once more. You didn't have to do this, he said. I didn't, I replied. You did. The door closed. The car pulled away. Silence settled over the yard again, broken only by the rustle of the magnolia leaves. Aisha exhaled slowly beside me. You were steady, she said. I am tired, I answered, honestly, but steady. Inside, the house felt different now, not violated, not uncertain. Reclaimed. Aisha reviewed next steps with quiet precision. There will be investigation, possibly formal charges for forgery and attempted fraud. The title company will cooperate. I nodded. In the living room, I straightened the photograph of Harold on the mantel. They underestimated me, I said softly. Yes, Aisha replied. They did. As evening light filtered through the windows, I made tea in my own kitchen. Proper tea. Not lukewarm, not rationed. The house creaked gently around me, familiar and alive. This wasn't victory yet. It was accountability beginning. And accountability, once set in motion, rarely stops halfway. The house was quiet that night. Not the fragile quiet of uncertainty, but the grounded silence of something reclaimed. After Aisha left, promising to return in the morning with updated filings, I walked through each room slowly. I didn't rush. I touched the back of my dining chairs, straightened the lace runner on the sideboard, adjusted the porcelain figurines Derek once tried to convince me were dated. Dated. As if longevity were a flaw. Upstairs, I opened every drawer they had disturbed. I checked the filing cabinet again, insurance documents intact, tax returns undisturbed, my will still sealed. They had searched for something specific, perhaps proof of liquid assets, perhaps confirmation of equity. But they hadn't found leverage beyond what they'd already tried to fabricate. In Harold's study, I sat at his old oak desk and opened my laptop. At 83, people assume technology is foreign terrain. It isn't. I may not dance on social media, but I understand email chains, timestamps, digital records. I logged into my bank account. There it was. A pending inquiry, initiated 3 days earlier, regarding a home equity pre-approval. My signature attached, not mine. I felt something colder than anger settle into place. They hadn't just forged a property transfer. They had attempted to access credit against my home. I forwarded everything to Aisha immediately with a single line. This goes deeper. Within minutes, my phone rang. I see it, she said. This escalates the scope significantly. Meaning? I asked. Meaning this isn't just about a rushed sale? It's financial exploitation. I closed my eyes briefly. Will they charge him? I asked quietly. If evidence supports intent and benefit, yes, she said. And the altered notary commission strengthens that case. I stood and walked to the window overlooking the street. The magnolia swayed gently. Mrs. Holloway's porch light glowed across the way. I didn't raise him to do this, I said softly. I believe that, Aisha replied. But intent matters now. After the call ended, I made one more decision. I opened a new document and began drafting changes to my estate plan. Not out of spite, out of clarity. If trust had fractured this easily, it required structure, not hope, to prevent it again. I removed Derek from power of attorney. I appointed an independent fiduciary. I outlined explicit conditions for any future property decisions. Control, once regained, must be reinforced. Later that evening, my phone buzzed again. A message from Derek. We need to talk. This has gone too far. I stared at the screen. Too far? He had altered documents, changed locks, attempted to leverage my home. And now it had gone too far. I typed back only one sentence. It went too far when you forged my name. He didn't reply. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, I locked every door. New locks. My keys. I made chamomile tea and sat in my own living room beneath the familiar glow of my reading lamp. The house no longer felt invaded. It felt defended. Tomorrow would bring formal interviews, documentation reviews, perhaps even charges filed. But tonight, for the first time since this began, I felt something steady settle in my chest. Not triumph. Not bitterness. Resolve. They had tried to reduce me to a signature on paper. Instead, they had reminded me exactly who I am, and in the morning, the consequences would continue unfolding. The investigation moved quickly after that. Northbridge Title submitted their internal findings within 48 hours. The notary, whose commission number had been used, provided a sworn statement confirming she had never met me, never witnessed my signature, and had not been present at Rosehaven on the alleged date. The equity inquiry tied directly to Derek's email address. Paper trails rarely lie. Aisha kept me informed without dramatics. Forgery, attempted fraud, financial exploitation, she said during one call. The district attorney's office is reviewing. I listened quietly. In another lifetime, I might have begged for discretion, might have asked for it to be handled quietly, might have prioritized reputation over truth. But at 83, clarity outweighs comfort. A week after I walked out of Rosehaven, Derek came to the house again. This time, he stood on the porch without arrogance. I opened the door, but did not invite him in. They're filing charges, he said. Yes, I replied. You could still withdraw the complaint. I could, I said calmly. Silence stretched between us. I panicked, he muttered. The investments collapsed. I thought I could fix it before you noticed. Before I noticed, I repeated softly. He rubbed his face. I was going to buy it back later. With what? I asked. He had no answer. I raised you to ask for help, I said quietly, not to steal it. His eyes watered, but I did not move toward him. Love does not erase accountability. I won't fight the charges, he said finally. That's your decision, I replied. He nodded once and stepped back from the porch. This time, when he left, I did not feel anger, only finality. In the weeks that followed, I completed the updates to my estate plan. An independent fiduciary now oversaw any major financial decisions. My accounts required dual authentication. The locks remained new. Rosehaven contacted me twice, once to clarify their internal procedures, once to inform me they were reviewing staff training protocols regarding document verification. I wished them well. Some lessons cost more than policy revisions. One afternoon, I sat in my garden beneath the magnolia tree, pruning carefully. The house stood behind me, unchanged, solid, mine. This wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries. They thought age made me pliable, thought isolation made me compliant, thought paperwork made me powerless. They were wrong. My dear friends, I won't judge Margot's choice, but strength doesn't expire with age. If this story meant something to you, write your thoughts below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.